Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur, talking today about Canada. What needs to change in our country? Another federal election has passed, and are we going to see any real change? Okay, before we jump into that, quick reminder to hit subscribe. Tell your friends about us as well. Appreciate that. Our guest joining us from Montreal, Maxime Bernier, of course, the leader of the PPC, the People's Party of Canada. And so good to have you with us, Maxime.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation as always. Always entertaining when you're on the other end of the line here. So now, of course, federal election 2025. It was a two-horse race is what it turned out to be. I think that surprised everybody. Smaller parties taking a hit on that. NDP, your party as well. So somewhat of a disappointment, of course, because it was, I believe, less than 1% of the vote that you got compared to 2021, where you did actually quite well. I thought, over 5% of the overall vote, not winning a seat, unfortunately for you, but still a significant portion of the vote going to you. So, in retrospect, looking back, what happened?
Yes, like you just said, it was not a normal election. It was mostly a referendum on who will be the best to deal with President Trump, Mr. Carney or Mr. Polyev. And so that was hurting every small political parties. But also for us, we wanted the election to be on the mass immigration because, as you know, we are the only national political party that is against mass immigration and for mass deportation. And knowing that 65% of the population in a recent survey were saying, enough is enough. We thought that we'll have a national discussion about that during the election, and that did not happen. That was disappointing. And also the fact that we didn't have a full slate of candidates for the first time. We had fewer than 320 candidates at the general election. A lot of our candidates just resigned at the last minute. And so that did not help us. We had only 248 candidates on 345 ridings. So what we are doing right now, the People's Party will always be there. We're going to be ready for the next election. We are right now, approving our candidates and also looking for other candidates. And we'll have more time. The next election can be in 2 years or 3 years, but it's always the same ideas, the same fight. And our time will come. It's a little bit more difficult in a parliamentary system than in Europe when you have proportionality. But we believe that we have the right ideas and the best vision for this country, and we'll do the fight.
Right. So I understand you're not going to be doing any major policy changes. However, would you do anything differently strategically, a different strategy come the next federal election?
Actually, what we did different at this election is the fact that I did a lot of podcasts. I must say US podcasts. I was with Patrick Bet-David, with Alex Jones, with also Tucker Carlson.
Carlson Tucker, yeah. Tucker Carlson, pardon me.
Yeah. And so that was good because a lot of Canadians are watching these influencers. But also, it's important, I think, for a national politician, a leader of a party, to do interviews more than 5 minutes and go deeply in our platform. And I think that's the future. So answering your questions, we will do more of that at the next election. And right now, what we have to do is to be more present on social media. I know that, young people between 18 and 35 years old, we have a kind of a support of 15%. So we need to reach to these young people. And that's why we started a TikTok account, Instagram account. I'm doing more videos and promoting the same ideas. So we will be focused on the same message and rebuild the organization across the country.
All right. Now, you were just in Alberta here, I think it was on Canada Day, helping your candidate Jonathan Bridges in the Battle River Crowfoot riding. That's a riding where Pierre Poilievre, of course, is running in the by-election here, so he gets a seat in Parliament and so forth. So how did that go? What are you hearing, from Albertans in rural Alberta, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not so surprised about that. I was there actually, like you said, the 1st of July. We did a parade together, me and Jonathan, a lot of people. But what they were telling me is, they're fed up with Ottawa, with the big fat government in Ottawa, and the separatist movement, mostly in rural Alberta, is very high. I look at the polls over there in Alberta, and more than 30% of the population may be ready to vote yes on a referendum on separation. And I was telling them, we at the People's Party, we are the last hope for this country. And because we believe in a radical decentralization, that's part of our platform. Everything that you want, you must be able to have it if the federal government will respect the Constitution. And that's not the case. So what I was telling them, and Jonathan also, is, a vote for Polyev. It's not a vote to end the Paris Accord. It's not a vote to stop the equalization payment. It's not a vote to stop mass immigration. So you need to remember that Polyev and Carney are the same on the most important issues. So we are there, and I hope that Jonathan will have a lot of support, and that will be an opportunity for voters in that riding to send a strong message in Ottawa. I believe that, and I hope that if Polyev is winning, he may win less than he may have not the same majority as his former candidates. I thought that he was able to win the election with 83% of the vote. So if Polyev is winning with 73% of the vote, that's a big signal. The leader of the Conservative Party of Canada may be not able to have the same score as his candidates. We'll see, and I'll be back in the riding in August to campaign with Jonathan.
Yeah, that would be a significant issue, wouldn't it? If there was less than 83% with the leader of the Conservative Party running there, right? So it'll be fascinating to see what happens. I know Jonathan Bridges. He ran in the 2021 federal election. I think it was in the Bow River riding, which is just, I believe, it's just
Yes.
south of it, kind of a neighboring riding, very strong conservative rural riding as well. And he got, I think, 10% of the vote, which is actually pretty good. So, so anything's possible, I guess, if you get your boots on the ground there. So, let me ask you, well, what parts of the country does the PPC get the most support from? Are there any particular regions that are kind of more strongholds for you?
I hope that we can have a part in the country like the Green Party of Canada where we have a
Yeah.
lot of support. As you know, the Green Party, they have a lot of support on the island of Vancouver, and it's easier for them to elect a candidate. Actually, they have one candidate in the House, as you know. For us, it can be also a good news that we don't have a strong support in a specific region. It's all across the country. That means that, we are a real national political party. So our ideas can be also good for Eastern Canada and Western Canada. But that being said, it's more difficult for us to have our first candidate elected. That's another challenge.
Yeah, that makes all the difference because then you get a lot more publicity. You have your voice with a microphone, right, rather than going without a microphone so much. So now the federal government continuing to negotiate with the U.S. for a trade deal. And of course, news this week that President Trump, surprise, surprise, has made some changes to the tariffs, now upping it to 35%. That's quite significant on all Canadian exports, unless Canada reduces the flow of fentanyl across the U.S. border, which of course we all know is hogwash. It's just something that Trump is using as a tool. However, the other caveat that he put in there was that he said, unless we get rid of our supply management deal with dairy producers, poultry, eggs, that sort of thing. So that's been a huge thorn in Trump's side here. So that's a significant issue. Now we're saying so basically, if we get rid of those things, then we'll get rid of the tariffs, is what he's saying, right? Now Carney has made a promise not to get rid of the the supply management system. You, on the other hand, think we should and could.
Yes, actually, I said that 8 years ago. It will be important not only for having a trade deal, but also for Canadian consumers. That's a cartel for dairy, poultry, and eggs, and these producers are fixing the price twice a year. And if you compare the prices of these products, milk, poultry, and eggs, with prices in US, it's almost twice the price. So Carney and Poliev, we must say, Poliev also, they all voted for the legislation in Canada saying, you don't have the right to put that cartel on the table. But actually, we must do that because I'm pretty sure that if we are not doing it, we won't be able to have a trade deal with the US, and that would be detrimental for Canadians and a lot of other industries in our country. So it's not responsible, and we can do that by giving also a transition period for these producers, like we did in the first free trade with the US in 1988, and with the wine industry in Ontario, they had a transition period, and you still have a wine industry in Ontario. So let's do that. Be serious. But you have Poliev and Carney. For them, they're working for the cartel and they're not working for Canadians.
So, how would that go over with voters? I know you know Quebec quite well. You've talked to people on the ground there. It's big business. Dairy in Quebec. So, would they go along with a transition period? Getting away from supply management and government subsidy, essentially. Well, there probably would be a government subsidy of some kind there, but now we'd have the flow of other dairy products and so forth coming up from the U.S. So more competition in that sense. But would they buy into that, you think, or would it be a huge loss of votes for whichever party brought that in?
No, I don't think that the cartel will buy in. These producers will do everything to fight. They have a huge privilege, and they want to keep that privilege, and I can understand that. So for them, it's not a question of they want to keep the status quo, and they will fight until the end. But for the voters, what they will do a big marketing campaign and telling people, oh, it will be the end of the world if we are abolishing that cartel. But we are able to explain that to voters, and I believe that voters are intelligent and they will understand. And usually, a lot of Canadians are traveling to the US and they can see the price of milk over there and they will understand. And also, don't forget that since the implementation of that cartel in the 1970s under Trudeau father, more than 90% of the family farm disappeared, more than
Hmm.
90%. So now that's big business, and so I want to work with voters and consumers and not with that cartel. So
Okay.
answering your question is, I think that, if you are out there and explaining to Canadians why we must do that, I strongly believe that Canadians will buy in and they will support the government. But too, the liberals and the conservative are so afraid of the cartel that they don't want to move.
Yeah, and understandably so. I mean, it's a big hit, but I mean I do appreciate that about you, Maxime. You're not afraid to go upstream against the current because you really believe in this. So that it's unfair and that it would be better overall for Canada to drop the supply management system. By the way, I've actually talked to some dairy farmers who agree with you. So
Yes.
I just don't know how widespread it is. So I mean that's anecdotal, right? But there are some who agree with you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you're right about that. There's some of them, not a lot, but they won't speak publicly because they're afraid of their union, and so that's why they're quiet.
yeah. Let's chat about Prime Minister Mark Carney for a minute here. He's talking the talk when it comes to our energy, oil and gas and so forth. And really, that's much of our economy as well. So do you believe that Carney will ever lift the, emissions camp, or emissions cap, the West Coast tanker ban, those kinds of things? Will he ever actually build a coast-to-coast pipeline, or is it all talk?
All that will depend on you guys in Alberta. You must keep the pressure. You must keep the pressure on Carney and Poliev also. And the way to do that is to have a referendum on the secession. I know that you may have maybe a referendum in 2026 on that. Keep the pressure. And we know that
Hmm.
Danielle Smith, she's asking for, I believe, 9 conditions or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if the pressure is there, Carney will want to stay in power. He will want to. He won't want to be the first prime minister who destroyed this country. So I believe that Alberta would be able to have everything, and we will push on that side also. We, the People's Party. If not, that will give more, ammunitions for the separatist movement in Alberta.
Hmm.
And I think by doing that, it will help Alberta, but also it will help other provinces if we have that pipelines and so across the
Oh,
country.
yeah. Well, it's
Yes.
definitely an economic benefit, no two ways about it. Is Quebec, now I know public sentiment has changed somewhat in Quebec. They're more open to a pipeline going through their territory, through their province. But, realistically speaking, do you think the politicians will actually, like, I guess this would be provincially
Yeah,
speaking,
yeah,
would
yeah.
they allow it at some point, you think?
I think the premier of Quebec, Legault, will change his position because you're right, the
Okay.
public opinion is changing, and we are in 2025. You can build a pipeline that would be very secure for the population and for the environment. It's more secure to transport oil and gas by pipelines than by train. Remember what happened in Lac Mégantic in Quebec a couple of years ago with a
Hmm.
train in a little
Yep.
village. So Quebecers are not stupid. I think they will buy that arguments. But that being said about Carney, right now it's all talks. There, yes, he did pass the bill
C5, yeah.
C5, yes. But I will wait until he will answer Danielle Smith request, and we'll see.
Yeah, okay. We'll definitely be watching anxiously here in Alberta. Talk to me a little bit about climate change. People need to hear your position on this as well. Again, this goes upstream, because this is really what it boils down to, right? I mean, you have this battle between climate change, and all the huge money we're sinking into that, and then, of course, putting restrictions on oil and gas, which is so beneficial for the economy. How do you see climate change?
But the climate is changing, will always change, but there's no climate emergency. That's why the People's Party will withdraw from the Paris Accord. I repeat, we will withdraw from the Paris Accord like President Trump did. We won't have any regulations to fight climate change. We won't impose any regulations to fight climate change, any taxations. So that's the opposite of the liberals and the conservative. People in Alberta must know. Poilievre is for the Paris Accord, and the Conservative Party of Canada is taking your vote for granted. Everything that you want, Poilievre is not speaking about that because he's looking for votes in Ontario and Quebec. And as you know, there's more seats in the great GTA around Toronto and Ontario than in all the province of Alberta. So Poilievre is more, like the Liberals. And for us, climate change, there's no emergency there. We won't do anything. And if it's so important for a province, at the provincial level, they can do what they want. But for us, we will withdraw from that pact and that
Okay.
agreement.
Well, maybe there still is hope. I think I just saw another survey done here, a national survey that shows less and less Canadians are putting climate change as their, big top concerns. They're much more concerned about the economy right now, and rightfully so, I would argue. You mentioned earlier about immigration still being a big issue for Canadians, and certainly it is. Again, we see the polls supporting that as well. I mean, the effect it has on everything from the housing market to, of course, even the clash of values that we see. I mean, and again, I guess we can be accused of being racist, but I don't think that's what it's about at all. I think it's just more there's different cultures have different values than Canadians do, and if we get a lot of those folks with different values coming here, then it's going to naturally cause some tension. So do we want to keep on doing that, or do we want to maybe put a cap on that? So explain your position on immigration.
Yes, you have a point there. Mass immigration plus the Multiculturalism Act in Canada, it's the perfect storm. We are having more people and migrants are coming to our country, and we are telling them, don't integrate into our society, don't participate in our culture, keep your culture. And by the way, the federal government will finance you, will give you money to celebrate, your culture. So that is destroying the social fabric of our country. It's happening right now in Europe, in UK, in Germany, and it is happening in Canada. That's why, when you said, speaking about that, I said that 7 years ago that mass immigration will have a huge impact on the housing housing crisis, and prices are going up. It's a question of supply and demand. Polyev was not able to speak about that because he's pandering to these ethnic groups across the country, knowing that they're living in a ghetto, in a riding, and to win some ridings, you need to pander to them. And that's what Polyev is doing. So for us, we need to end that. And that's why also you have the separatist movement here in Quebec that is very alive. The leader of the PQ is speaking a little bit like me on immigration. Too much is too much. We must end that. We must have a moratorium. And Quebecers are happy with that. And in the polls at the provincial level, the PQ is in advance, and the provincial election will be in 2026, next year in Quebec. And the leader of the PQ is saying, if I'm elected premier, you will have a referendum on the secession again. So we may have a referendum on the secession in Alberta in 2026 and one in 2027 in Quebec. So it's time to look at that and fight for Canadians if we want to preserve our country, and ending that mass immigration that is having an impact on everything: healthcare, housing, the cost of living, everything.
So you would actually also want to see much more face-to-face interviews. So when people are coming here, we actually know who they are. They're not just filling out. Apparently, the vast majority of people now simply it's done electronically. You check off the boxes, and then they'll go through it and filter through that. But there's so much more to it, isn't it? When you see somebody face to face, look in the eye. Is this a person who has Canadian values? Is this somebody we'd want to have here, and we could trust that person? That makes a difference, I think, face to face.
Yeah, that's our position, but we won't do that in the next couple of years because our
Yeah.
position is a moratorium. So we want to stop that, no more. So we won't do any interviews, but and we want to do that because we need to integrate all these people, and after that, after a couple of years, when we'll start back with immigration and opening our doors, yes, at that time we'll do face-to-face interviews, and same
Okay.
thing with the foreign international students. They're coming here, they're studying, they don't want to leave after that. Most of them are coming from India, and they are doing some protests. They said we have the right to stay. No, when you have a permit, a temporary permit for studying in Canada, when you have your diploma, usually you go back. That was the case before. And if
Yeah.
you want to be a Canadian citizen, you go back in your country, you apply in your country at our embassy, and you'll have more chances to be
Yep.
approved because you know the country, you were there for a couple of years, but you have to go back to your country. Now Polyev and Carney want to give them a gift. You don't respect our legislation, you're staying here, you must go back to your country, but it's okay, we'll give you the permanent residency. That's not good. We need to deport them, they need to go back to their country, and if they want to be a permanent resident, they need to apply in their country at our base, at our embassy over
Yeah.
there.
It needs to be done legally, and there's some rules that need to be followed, and that makes sense. Um, Gun control in the news here again. The last week here with the RCMP banning some more rifles, and so it's interesting. Your party has a different take on self-defense than
Yeah.
other parties.
Yeah, we believe in the castle defense like in the US. So you must have the right to defend yourself with a gun if somebody is coming in your house.
Right.
And now it's not the case. Sometime, that will be the victims who will be, charged by the RCMP if they use an arms to defend themselves and their properties. So that being said, we need to change the criminal code for that. The RCMP, you're right about that. They can, decide which gun is legal, which gun is illegal. In our proposal on guns, it must be members of parliament. It must be legislation, and we will change that. The parliament will take all that power back, and we will pass a legislation to the and we won't decide which gun is maybe the look is too dangerous and that's why
Yeah.
it's forbidden. No, you have a right to own guns and that's your property. And so we'll change the legislation to be sure that is part of
Okay.
our way of life.
And of course, transgender rights continue to be an issue across Canada, here in Alberta especially. And our government here, of course, is taking some steps to change that, but running into some legal issues with some judges. So, should parents have the right to get involved and stop their child from deciding to change genders. Should parents know what's going on in their schools if their child makes a decision along those lines? Should women's sports be protected from biological males, joining in and potentially causing some physical harm even, right? And again, the whole competition angle, I mean, that's a serious thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. On all these questions, the answer is yes. And we said that, almost 5 years ago. I was the first leader to speak about that. A month before uh, Billboard Chris. As you know,
Right.
Billboard Chris is fighting for that. I had a discussion with him a couple of months ago, and I said, Billboard, Chris, you did a very good job there to try to change the legislations in Canada and other countries, and you were the first one. And he looked at me and he said, no, Maxime, you were the first one in Canada a month before me to speak about these issues. And now Daniel Smith is doing some small steps, but it's in a good direction. So for us, all that must be illegal for an inmate to be transferred to girls, jails if you're a man. Same thing with sport, transitioning that does not exist. It must be illegal to give hormone blockers to kids. The parents must be able to decide. School, when they're using another
Yeah.
name for the kids, it must be also illegal. All that, we must go back in common sense and our real, values.
Well, you mentioned it right there, common sense, and I'm just running out of time here. Pardon me, Maxime, but I appreciate you and your party have a lot of common sense ideas. So keep that up. You got a big road ahead of you here, but I want to let people know about your website here, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, to check out some of your policies. Thanks so much for your time today, Maxime.
I appreciate that. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.
You too. All right. And as always, tell your friends about us. Hit subscribe. All right. WizeUp.ca. You can check out more of our episodes there. And if you have any suggestions for us, just Paul at WizeUp.ca. God bless.